Today's guest is one of the most reflective and influential voices in modern public relations. Stephen Waddington, or Wadds, as many of you will know him, has spent 25 years in practice, leading agencies, advising boards, and now running Wadds Inc, his professional advisory firm for agencies and comms team, including my own eBroadcast. He's also a doctoral researcher exploring the relationship between management and public relations, and the author of 10 books, including the definitive textbook Exploring Public Relations Management Communication. Stephen has held senior leadership roles at places like Ketchum, Speed, and founded his own tech PR agency, and today sits on as a non-exec director at some of the most progressive agencies in the UK and beyond. Alongside all of this, if it's not enough, he co-founded Socially Mobile, a not-for-profit PR school helping people from underrepresented backgrounds progress their careers into PR. He's been described as the Gordon Ramsay of PR, tough when needed, but a leader who brings clarity, perspective, and solutions when they're most at need. So, how do you navigate a career across practice, teaching, writing books, and research while pushing PR to be recognized as a true management discipline? Let's find out. Stephen, let's start where we always do. How did you fall into PR? Was it planned, or was it something that just came out of the blue?
No, I think, thanks for the amazing introduction, by the way. I love that. I need those notes. I really do. I fell very firmly. A lot of people do, don't they? It's very common. I don't think people deliberately decide because public relations isn't promoted as a career necessarily within schools, and it absolutely should be. So I trained as an engineer originally, and I did a stint. I did a thick sandwich course at Salford University in Manchester in electrical engineering, and the third year was out in practice, and I got a job for 12 months working on the Dartford River crossing. At the time, they were commissioning a new toll booth system. It was the most horrendous year of my life, working antisocial hours, living in a travel lodge in Dartford. Oof. I mean, albeit as a student, you were reasonably paid, but it was just tough.
Yeah.
Really tough. And I went into my fourth year and thought, engineering really isn't for me. And I'd started during that time at university writing, and writing for a couple of magazines. And I developed this career as a technical writer when I left university, and that took me into PR.
It's fascinating. I did not know that you started out going towards engineering, but in a way, I was talking to Daryl about this in another episode.
Daryl Sperry.
Yes. The things that sort of set you up in a positive way, as a building block. Do you think that there's something in the engineering world that you trained in to begin with that put you on a path for the engineering of PR?
Yeah. So two aspects to that, because you said I'm a doctoral researcher, and I've been doing that for the last 3 or 4 years. And as part of that, you have to do a lot of self-reflection. And so I've thought a lot about this and done a lot of work around it personally. And I think there's two things. I think first thing is that critical mindset that you learn through learning. And learn as an engineer. The second thing is that as an engineer, you would never do anything without, first of all, planning it, running experiments, testing those experiments, ensuring that what you planned to do was going to work and would come in on time, on budget.
That doesn't sound like modern engineering at all.
Well, yeah, because you know where all the variability is. The point is, you would do nothing without having some sort of empirical and theoretical basis and testing to what you were doing. clearly completely opposite of the majority of public relations practice, where we just do. So that might definitely brought that rigor and mindset into PR. And looking around PR, you wonder, why all those aspects are missing.
It is genuinely fascinating. So I know that you also work with Daryl, and one of the things that we were talking with him on was this focus on numbers.
Yeah.
And obviously they've got it in their name, hard numbers, but the focus on numbers in terms of understanding where you're going, whether it's commitment to KPIs, all of that stuff that makes them who they are. Again, from our side, if you look at a B broadcast, we're looking at numbers to help guide and pinpoint strategies for clients. Those two aside, do you think if you look at it from an engineering point of view, do you think that modern public relations does do enough when it comes to planning, testing, executing, or is it still in that kind of gut feel territory?
Yeah, there's still very much a branch of practice that's focused on creativity, on the idea, and the idea is the end in itself, rather than necessarily, why are we doing what's the business problem, what's the organizational problem we're solving for, and then rooting that solution in an investigation of data is just as you've described. Yeah, I mean, we celebrate in practice the originality of the idea. You get awards for them for the idea, rather than actually
showing the working,
showing the outcome, showing the actual, how much money you've saved, delivered, created, opportunity.
Yeah, it's funny. I have just started a mentorship program where I am a mentor for someone coming up. And one of the first things that I was talking to him about, I don't know if they had this at school when you were there, was the notion in English to pee all over stuff.
Yes.
So, but the pointer being, I think something that's really lacking in what we do is the evidence, the point where we can really back up, whether it's through data, and I think data is always really hard to argue with, the reason why a creative should go the way it should.
Look, there's two aspects to this. There's a lack of critical thinking generally within society. There's a lack of media literacy within society. Public relations reflects society. We can maybe come on to talk about how it doesn't often, but should reflect society, and it reflects those weaknesses within society, and they are absolute gaps within practice. So understanding media from a critical perspective and reading widely, and understanding argument, being able to make and defend or challenge argument, really, really important skills. Now, we're getting hung up at the moment within public relations practice about the impact of AI, is it going to take entry-level jobs? Actually, no. If we have a critical perspective, it can be, hugely assistive to what we do.
Yeah. Talk to us about some of the research and work that you've been doing in terms of AI and crossover with PR. What you touch upon the impact on those entry-level positions.
Yeah.
There might be a group of junior colleagues in our sector that are a bit worried at the moment. Why are you confident that it won't necessarily have that impact?
I think it creates opportunity. So there's three, abstract a little bit and back up. There's three big opportunities around public relations and AI. So I've been fortunate enough for the last 6 months to work on a project with a guy called Ben Verinder. We pulled together a bunch of thinkers and doers from across the UK to think about these issues. And there's a book coming out in May next year. It will be published by Kogan Page. But we created this community of practice to think around these issues. And we've identified there's three main issues. The first one is the societal issue. So it's, where every organization is coming up against AI. Every organization will have its AI moment. How they're going to deal with that? They need people who have an understanding of the public sphere to be able to understand that, the risk and the opportunity So that's the first one, as an advisory role for us. The second one is, you rightly say, it can create content very cheaply and at a low cost. A lot of it can be nonsense. It needs to be approached with a critical perspective. You need to think and design for issues and be human led in your approach to that. But it can be hugely supportive in augmenting our role. And that goes all the way from, supporting and helping content, simple things like testing headlines, creating alternative headlines, challenging your work, acting as an editor. Those are really useful and helpful tasks and argue. Then right the way through to, really valuable tasks when you've got a huge data set. I've got a data set at the moment with 35,000 points in it. That's going to be a lot of time to work through that.
Excel.
Yeah, that's a lot of Excel. I can tell you, it's almost 500 lines deep and 70 columns wide. It's a lot. And so anything I can get, any tool I can get to help me make sense of that, it's going to be useful. So incredibly useful. Yeah. And that's where you've seen some of the most exciting aspects of AI, where it really is pushing us forward in terms of human intelligence and helping make sense of big complexity. So that's the second one. And the third one is this big, hugely contested area called generative engine optimization. The thinking that a lot of the responses from AI systems are instructed by earned and owned media, and we don't quite understand. We know that when you ask a query, it's surfacing earned media results in responses, but we haven't quite figured out the attribution model for that, and that's very contested at the moment. But therein is huge opportunity that for PR actually might win back the digital PR debate from search engine optimization.
I find it as someone working in this space, I find it exciting, and I don't mean that in a cringe way. Like, I'm dead excited about the opportunity. It's more in the sense of something happened over the last couple of weeks. We were leading something linked to broadcast that went out globally. It went out into the States and it landed really effectively. Now, one of the things that came as a result of that was it was being picked up. We were testing against the LLMs, specific things, and we were putting in prompts to try and measure the impact. Is this thing that we've done here having an impact on ChatGPT, Claude, etc.?
Yeah.
And what we found is that it appeared in 5 different markets around the world.
Yeah.
And also in the States where it had landed, it was pulling from a source that effectively the C-suite had written off.
Right.
So it was.
Was it Reddit or something like that?
No, it was actually a regional TV platform from a state that wasn't being targeted.
Right. Okay.
Because where the organization is predominantly in the places like New York, California, Texas, and so they were. I think, if I remember rightly, it was Iowa, and the story had gone so mainstream that it had landed in it was a really horrible report to write, but it had landed in pretty much every WSNBC in everywhere, and it had landed there, and that was where it was scooping from.
Yeah.
And that immediately gives power to the PR team to be able to say, actually, the strategy that is being set almost by the C-suite from a comms point of view is the wrong strategy, potentially.
Yeah.
And it means that all of the rules that we have previously been looking at are almost null and void. Yeah. Which I find exciting because it means you can rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah. So already with estimates are that consumer behavior is changing such that traffic to publisher websites is down by about 1/5 because it's now going to Perplexity or OpenAI or Gemini. So that's a massive behavior change within 2 years. And the point you made is really well made, actually. That yes, we have an opportunity, a really significant opportunity, to try and understand what is the relationship between how a machine gathers and creates those insights and responds to queries and the media that we create and earn on behalf of our clients. It's really interesting. We haven't figured out that attribution, and it's really contested at the moment. But you're right. Clearly, there's a cause and effect, and you've identified it there. I said Reddit because often, PR teams dismiss Reddit, but Reddit is definitely in the top 5 sources that a large language model will use to serve an answer.
But I think that's exactly it. I think that anything that has previously been dismissed, you almost have to relook at it again. And I find that really interesting because my mind works when it comes to this. I've talked to you about mission control. I love looking and spotting patterns and things that are you're then able to make a bit of a judgment and then try something here and try something there, and suddenly you make a way through.
This is hugely exciting as well for practice, right? Because suddenly, like mission control, you have access, you're able to access huge amount of data. We have the tools, large language models, to make sense of those data. And suddenly we can use that data to inform PR strategy. Traditionally in public relations, we've come with a hypothesis and we've then looked for the data to support that hypothesis, which is completely the wrong way around, right? We've all been in a room, right, where we said we want the headline of the press release to be X, right? Okay, let's retrofit a survey to fit that. Happens all the time. Whereas now, actually, we have this opportunity to connect data, insight, and strategy together in a really assertive way.
You've moved from kind of agency board member, really active in agency life, into kind of advisory roles.
Yeah.
Where's that come from? Tell us about that.
I've had this conversation. That's a really good question, actually, because I've had this conversation several times with my wife, Sarah, CEO of the PRCA. We've set up a couple of businesses together. We've run businesses together, and we've had that exact conversation. Why don't you go and start another agency? What would be your agency? And I think I don't think I've got the energy to do it necessarily.
You're like, agencies don't work anymore.
No, agencies absolutely work. But I haven't got the energy maybe to do it again, because it takes a massive amount of energy to build something from scratch in that way. And, I've got to the point in my career where I want to do other stuff as well. And we have Socially Mobile, and actually the academic, I think investing my time through research and answering some of the big problems that the industry faces and needs help with taking it forward is probably a better place for me to be operating at this moment. But there are times when, working with yourself and working with some of the agency clients that I advise, where I just want to roll my sleeves up and get involved still. You never lose. If you work in PR, you never lose the buzz of a story.
No. Well, we've got plenty of work if you're looking. We can chuck some things your way if you've got a few hours to kill. You talk about the big challenges. GEO, AI is one. What do you think some of the others might be that we perhaps aren't thinking about at this stage?
We don't represent the public that we serve. I think it's really interesting. I've took a cab to the studio here. We're in Manchester through Salford. I was at university in Salford and Prestwick. And, on every house, on a lot of the houses, there's St. George's flag. Mm-hmm. And it's the same at Liverpool in the north of England. And if you go up to Cramlington and through some of the old mining villages up on the northeast coast, same thing. And there's a conversation that's some sort of racist trope. And actually, I don't think it's completely misunderstood. Yes, there are people that fly St. George's flags that are racist, but actually, it's a protest that and people signifying that they're unheard and want to be heard. And our industry is dealing with this issue at the moment in the same way as we dealt with Brexit. We're completely ignoring these voices.
Yes.
And so I think it's really, really terrifying because, that makes space for the far right and the Farage government in 2029. And that is terrifying.
you've signaled that we can talk politics, so I'm going to go health.
Sorry,
health
I suddenly felt really uneasy going there, but I've got it. We've done it.
No, it's too late.
But our industry, I don't think our industry, our industry is very London centric and very middle class. Data recently published that's talks about the disproportionate nature of or the mismatch between society and socioeconomic representation within the industry, and it's an absolute chasm. And unless you've got those voices and representation inside the where the thinking's going on, you're going to come to the view that someone that flies a St. George's flag is racist.
Yeah, and it's the. I remember seeing a post on LinkedIn from somebody who I really, really respect within the industry, and it wasn't a bad post at all. I don't want to say that, but it was. They were highlighting, I think, following the riots last year, and she was making the point about how I should say she's a person of color, so she was giving her experience, and she was talking about when she visited Manchester. And it wasn't long after the Brexit vote. And I lived in Manchester during the Brexit vote. And she talked about her unease and, how effectively Manchester was this sort of, I read much more into it than she'd even given the point, but it was effectively, how she felt in the city at the time. And it really bothered me. I think it upset me in the sense of that's not the Manchester that I know. And I messaged and I was like, please come back and I'll take you around. Do you know what I mean? I felt like I needed to stand up and say that. And I agree. I think there is something that's really missing, and our sector is definitely doing it. We're talking to Advita about this in particular. She wrote a post recently about the silence from our sector on this. And I read it and I also took it personally, not in the sense of most things I take personally, but I read it and I took it personally because I thought, I sort of want to say something, but I don't know if I'm the right person to say, and I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's a bit of that going on. What could we be doing better as a sector to begin with?
That's a really good question. So I've had this conversation with Darryl Sperry. It's the second time he's come up in this conversation. so we have a similar background, working class kids, landed in an industry, can't quite believe every day we're here, we, just this view that if the industry believes that, festivals like Cannes represent wider society, it's completely mistaken. And every year Cannes comes around, one of us will post about bringing Cannes to Cramlington in the northeast of England, and letting people see what it's like, because it's that lack of understanding of the lived experience of the majority of people in Britain that I think is a real concern. That's fundamentally driving a lot of these issues, and we as practitioners aren't going to understand them if we're not embedded within these communities.
Yeah, you will know based on your time in Salford. The advert, I think it was for Magnum ice cream. Although it might have been nicer when you were here. The Magnum ice cream there was an advert saying there's nothing better than Magnum and Piccadilly Gardens.
Right.
Piccadilly Gardens is not a place where you'd go and have a Magnum. And it's that, there is that definite disconnect between how London will see the North almost as a homogenous zone, and group it together when actually it is anything but.
Yeah.
And I find it a challenge. And I think as an agency, it would be, I would never do it, but it would be so much easier, I suspect, if we were based in London.
Yeah.
And, and that's including the technology like Zoom, Teams, where, everything is done on that regardless. I think that, just being there would make a big difference. And we can talk the talk at the time when you need to, but actually, I think we really need to look differently. The industry at large needs to represent, and it doesn't just mean doing an award ceremony here. It means truly representing it from the people that work in the sector to where they work in the sector. Media City as a beacon, in terms of bringing people to the northwest, changing that entire part of Salford is significant. We just need more of that now. We've seen it with media, but I don't know if we've seen it with PR.
There's a few examples. So the perspective of our industry association, the PRCA, will change, and it will take some time, but it will change with its new leader, Sarah Waddington, at the helm. I mean, goodness sake, she's based in Newcastle, so there's a change right away. And then there are organizations like Agency by Agency that are starting to tell the story of regional agencies and regional creative output from the public relations industry. And we need more of those stories to be told.
Tell us a little bit. We've touched on Socially Mobile. Yeah. I'm involved in it. Tell us a bit more.
You are, thank you.
More than welcome. Tell us a bit more for someone that hasn't necessarily come across it yet. What is it?
So it brings together a couple of things. So Sarah and I have both been at various points leaders of the CIPR. Me in 2014, her in 2018. We looked at this issue of diversity within the industry, and we found there were two challenges. The first one is PR is not promoted as a career within schools, so we fall into it rather than deliberately choose to go into it because it's not seen as a career option, and that needs to change. But that's a massive job that's been taken on by in other sectors. Women in engineering, women in science. It requires massive budgets to do that. So we weren't going to solve for that. But then we looked at the data. That's the first problem. The second problem is people get a career in PR, but they don't get the support of training and education. And so you'll go through your career and be competent as a practitioner in sort of communication function, maybe get to an account manager, an account director, and then to get to the next level, it's a real step. Because you have to get skills in people management. You have to learn to read financial documents. You have to understand data planning strategy. You have to understand measurement. You have to understand the risk register and all these factors. And people tend to drop out. And so I led a research project at the end of last year, published at the start of this year, called The Missing Women. And this project describes this effect that people get to a certain point in their career it's particularly acute for women because it tends to coincide with having children, and then fall out of the profession. We lose a tremendous amount of people. We calculated in the UK, in England and Wales, it was about 4,000 people from practice, fall at that gap. So we set up Socially Mobile, and we're in to celebrate our 5th year next year. We've just started our 12th cohort, and it's based on the exec education model that came out of universities during COVID. And that is an intense sort of mini MBA type course where you are, for a 10-week period, you are taught all these different aspects. I described the syllabus to you. You're given exposed to management areas of competency, and it's taught by, we've reached into our network, it's taught by people who are absolutely the leaders,
the best of the best. I'm not a teacher, by the way.
Oh, you should be. Are leaders in the industry, and so people are exposed both to lessons and case studies from them. Along the way, they're supported through our office hour sessions, and we'll have guest lecturers. And it's examined and assessed to high standard. It's an organisation that certifies education in public relations and management communication, called the Global Alliance. We're very proud that last year we received certification from them. So it's done to a really high standard. And they graduate with a 10-week, after this 10 weeks, with a certificate in leadership communication. We're now at the process stage where 150 graduates from 4 years, heading towards 200. And that group of people are becoming a real activist community and a force for change within the industry, and are starting to really challenge in organizations. That's wonderful to see.
It's great.
Yeah.
What does Socially Mobile need going into 2026, 27?
Two things: students and money. We've lent into our networks to raise money, and you know, every so often we'll have a fundraising round, and actually people, you know, the industry responds really, really well in that it's become self-sustaining. And then we need students, so we're continually to recruit. We're getting to the stage where it's starting to become self-sustaining, which is great.
Great. Yeah. In terms of students, so obviously, can you talk through if someone's listening and thinking that they might fall into the category, what are the sort of criteria that they might need to meet?
Well, so we've realized that there's a commercial opportunity to socially mobilize well. So now you can pay to buy a place on the course, and if you buy a place, you're funding a place for somebody else.
Yep.
So that's helping with income and reducing our reliance on sponsorship. To get a free place on the course, if you're not a teacher, you're an assessor then, are you?
I am an assessor, yes.
Right, okay.
Yep.
So you review applications. Thank you. So
it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's one of the hardest. It's one of the hardest things to do, because it's looking at the free places, and it's making sure that they're being allotted in the best possible way. And we get together as a team, and we go through them, and it's hard work, and it's really rewarding. But it's your picking between people that would really benefit, and you're trying to, you know, pull. So to your point about we've funded places, but to your point about, you know, putting forward and being a sponsor, it's really important that we all play our role in that function too.
Yeah, so you know, we're looking for people that meet the characteristics that I described, that are from an underserved community within public relations, and it crosses all characteristics. You know, go visit the website and check it out. And if you're at that stage in your career, we say you need a minimum of 2 years, but typically people come with, you know, they've got to the, you know, they've acquired the basic skills of practicing and you know, they're in a functional role typically, and they want to make that stretch into management. So, you know, people can come with 5 to 20 years experience. There's nothing, you know, no careers in public relations are highly contextual. There's no two the same. So, you know, we're open to everyone. If you are from an underrepresented community and you haven't you want to acquire those managerial skills, the assessment community actually has really helped us. So that's led by Ben, isn't it? Ben Verinda. And, you know, we have a community, it should be said, there's 60 odd people around. It is in every sense a community of interest company, because we have a community of around 60 volunteers like yourself who are helping with various different aspects of it. And that assessment role is really important, because Ben Verinda has started to push back with, you know, the team of people, including yourselves, where it's obvious that somebody comes from maybe a large organization where they maybe should be able to pay.
Yep.
And so we have started challenging. That's been really interesting. In the last 2 years, we've started challenging employers to actually, you know, go and ask your employer whether they can fund this. Here's the business case you need to make. And that's started to change as well. It really has.
You know, we started this talking about data, and we started this talking about the importance of being able to put together an argument, but putting together a case.
Yeah.
And actually, that is one of the skills that we really need within our sector, more so than ever. If you're battling for budget against something over here and something over there, you need to be able to position your thing as the the best option. And that also accounts for you as a person. So being able to put together a case for your company to say, this is why I would benefit and you would benefit from this
Yeah.
thing is key. But it's
Yeah.
not something that is it's not something that is necessarily writ large. Talking of challenges, over the years, you've worked with people like us, Don't Cry Wolf, Hard Numbers. What are the big kind of overarching challenges that you see agencies going through in 2025?
Growing pains. It's a real growing pains in the market. It's a really hard market out there, and to punch, it's really noisy, and punching through requires particular type of leader who's able to run a business, but is also able to advocate and sell. And we've listed a lot of the challenges we're facing as an industry already. So you're operating across all of that, but then also you've got to be able to cut through and win sales. And I think that the response for that for independent businesses is to have a very, very clear perspective and point of view proposition, if you like, which you have B Broadcast has with strategic broadcast, or a strategic approach to broadcast public relations, and you need that hard numbers. Hard numbers is
Yep.
in the name. Yeah. So,
what advice would you give to someone who might be listening and might be thinking about setting out on their own journey at this stage?
This is really interesting, actually, because quite a
Are you
few
thinking of starting an agency?
No, but quite a few of my clients, I've taken a number of clients now on this journey from being a freelancer on a day rate to starting an agency, it's a lot of work. It's hard work. It requires a lot of drive, requires a lot of determination, but also, the rewards are massive. You can end up working with, incredible clients and doing incredible things. I want to roll my sleeves up and get involved often. So what would I advise? I mean, so find your niche, find your passion, lean into it.
Yeah.
And you can do all that as a freelancer. If you're gonna go freelance and take the lead, realize you need some economic security around you. You're going to put yourself in quite a vulnerable position. A lot of people go freelance after losing a job or being made redundant. If you've got some savings or redundancy payment behind you, it gives you that economic security to try it for a period of 3 months. You need that because it's going to be hard without worrying about the financial aspects of it. So you need to protect yourself, get some resources around you, and then try it. You need to build a proposition that responds to the market.
Yeah. We've talked about politics. We've talked about money now, the two things that you're not supposed to speak about. It's interesting. I did a talk about PR at a school. There's a program that it runs nationwide where they basically try and get people to go in and just talk about what they do.
Yeah.
What do we do? And one of the things that they warned me was one of the first questions that kids will always ask now, how much do you earn?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm fine with that. But I was like, I quite like the fact that they're switched on, because we have these topics. And I think if you look at the St. George's Cross situation, if you look at the economic situation, we have these topics that we're told not to speak about. But do you think the generations that are coming through, societal change, industry change, those things are getting better, or do you think they're getting worse?
I think there's still topics that are taboo, no doubt. The financial one is really interesting because I think that's coming to the fore because of the transfer of wealth that we have seen from the working classes to the middle classes to the financial elites. And the accumulation of assets by the financial elites. You cannot argue with that. That fact, and so that is mobilizing a whole generation who are looking at that and seeing. And we saw it during COVID, right? COVID, the investment by the government in every citizen in the UK was around £20,000. Well, I haven't got £20,000 as a legacy from COVID, didn't you? Where did that money go? It was a transfer of wealth to the elites, and that's the issue that I think our whole political system is challenged by at the moment. And it's interesting the one place where that discussion is taking place is within the Green Party, but nowhere else. But Labour needs to be agitated over it.
You've brought up politics again. Let's go back into that. We are recording this in early October. We've just had, I think we're still in the midst of the Labour Party conference, and we've had Keir Starmer's speech. Right. So the context, the kind of quite bold speech that Keir Starmer made. What do you make of... not necessarily the government's current performance, but what do you make of this sort of moment in time where we're seeing the government sort of kick back into touch? Do you think they're doing it in the right way? Do you think we're starting to go in the right direction, or no?
I don't know. But seeing is believing, right? We want to see the evidence. So the Labour Party, the party conference was pitched around this view of renewal. Actually, renewal was the theme of the election, and the fact that post-COVID, 5 years post-COVID, we need to think of our place post-COVID and Brexit. We need to think of our place, reimagine our place in the world, and that hasn't happened because the government's been dragged down into the fundamentals of managing the economy and has set itself up with this petard of the 5 pledges, first one being growth. Well, it's an incredibly challenging world out there. And the government hasn't got control of all the levers that it maybe would like to be, and to drive the economy. So that's a massive challenge, and it is singularly failing to tell its story. It's being dragged into a narrative being set by the far right, by Farage, around that it's all the fault of immigration.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. I was looking because I watched the speech live, and I thought, I've not seen. I'm not a fan of Keir Starmer. I have always voted Labour. I didn't vote Labour in this last election. I voted for the Greens.
Right.
I have been keeping an eye in terms of temperature of what's been going on. One thing I thought was, after this speech, just felt like a different person at that box. And we did some analysis of the 24 hours after. Starmer had something like 17,000 mentions versus Nigel Farage and Reform 5,499. And we dug into what does that mean? What are the topics what are the words and things that were being used in phone-ins? Starmer was kind of seen as, I wrote a comment about it, I just can't remember what I said, it must have been important. Essentially, Starmer was seen as kind of strong, confident, on the front foot, whereas actually Farage was seen as serious, which is interesting, serious, clear, but also angry and divisive. And I found it interesting to see, just this immediate response to what might be a bit of a movement back, but it's a really tricky thing to see if that translates later on into public support.
It's really interesting that your analysis suggests that the seeing is doing there. We've got to see the evidence behind that, and the far right being allowed, and Farage and Reform being allowed to pin the issues, or being allowed by Labour to pin the issues of the country is facing on immigration is completely wrong. The fact that government is responding on that, and stop the boats, it's created its own rhetoric around it. it completely misjudges the situation because, you're already on the back foot to a political opponent that's gaining ground on you.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily, we started talking about the flags that are going up, and you make that point about voices not being heard, not being seen. And actually we've started these problems and these challenges 20, 30 years ago, if not more. And they're now coming to fruition, and we've got a government that isn't quite ready to deal with them.
No, it's not telling a story. It's the same with the European Union. And the European Union didn't advocate during, for 20 years ahead of Brexit. No one was telling the story of all the good stuff. I mean, in our own region where I live, in Newcastle, you go all along the river, and there's development. There's flags around. The little blue plaques are everywhere, funded by regeneration, funded by the European Union. And yet, we were one of the strongest Brexit voting areas in the country. And Sunderland was. It's just complete mismatch.
I found it fascinating that when we used to have the Tory party conference in Manchester, they would use GMEX as a part of what they would do. And on the side of it, quite literally on the side of it, was one of those funded by the European Union.
Right.
It's just a bit like, I don't know if I'd pick that building if you were going down that direction. It's a fascinating thing about how we almost have to sow the seeds of what is coming down the line. Going off a different direction, book writing.
Yeah.
A passion, clearly.
Yeah.
What does it take to start, and what's the process that you go through to get something like that off the ground?
So there's two ways of doing it. There's the multi-author book where you're bringing together a community of people, and so the AI book that's coming out next May is in that vein. The book I edit with Ralph Tench at Leeds Beckett, Leeds Business School, is in that vein as well. It's you assemble a community of experts and corral and guide them through the process of publishing a book, and that's hugely rewarding because you're working with lots of people. You're also herding cats because everyone has different motivations at different stages of life, and you've got to manage and run that process. There's a lot of fake deadlines built into work plans to take the stress away. So that's that. And then, but writing your own book, you've got to come up with a clear idea and put one word in front of another. It's that straightforward. I've always been, I was very early into blogging. I've always been used writing as a means of reflecting and thinking out loud. And so, blog goes back 20 odd years, publishing newsletter where I'm, looking at research coming out of our sector and pulling it apart and thinking through some of the issues. And that's, that's how I built a community around the work I do.
You strike me as someone that is sort of excited by the prospect of trial and error when it comes to tools.
Yeah, that's the engineering mindset.
Yeah. I remember you had, it was a while back now, but you'd created PR Stack.
Yeah.
And
10 years old this week, though.
Is it?
Yeah, it is.
Oh. Yeah. Well, I still have PR Stack in a file somewhere, but I previously had it printed out, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it was a genuine, when I had new starters, after about 6 months of getting in, and once they understood the tools, the systems that we used, I would quite literally hand them PR Stack, and I would say, I want you to start looking at things about how we challenge different things. So it was just quite literally a list, and I would still go and look at it now, to be honest, if you haven't. But
That's nice.
Effectively just tools that can complement what we do within. I wonder how much of it now would just be replaced by.
It'll all be replaced by a large language model.
That's scary now.
Yeah,
but it's that trial and error and play and test that we should be doing more.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to say that. I'd been at a conference in highly worthy conference in a real pinch me moment at the University of London. So there's this organization called UPERA, which exists. It's a community of research scholars across the world, mainly in Europe, but it's people who are focusing on strategic communications and management and the social sciences around communication. And I got invited to deliver the keynote. And the keynote was, they asked me to speak about why there is such a bridge between theory and practice, why the two never should meet. And they don't. I mean, we are different people. We operate different. We have different media. We operate in different spaces. We go to different events. Never the two shall meet. Yeah, I'm operating in this hinterland between the two.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting space to occupy, actually, because it gives you an opportunity to be the messenger back and forth, but then also to be the one that's translating some of this complexity into simple ideas. And that I really like PR Stack because you used it there. You said it's how to, and it was how to. And so as an output from my research, I want to do almost the comic book, the how to from it, because
Yes.
I think it's a format that will work really well.
I had an exec, and I was an account manager, I think, at the time. And I had an exec who was really struggling with writing.
Yeah.
There was nothing wrong with her writing. She had no confidence in her writing, and she had dyslexia.
Yeah.
And so she kept writing things and then getting feedback. I was her line manager at the time. She was getting feedback, this is good, but you've made errors here and you've done this. You need to check your, print it off and read it. Things that are of course important, but also these are the things that, with dyslexia, it's things that you're going to miss. One of the tools that was in there was Grammarly.
Oh, Grammarly, right, Grammarly.
And quite literally,
yeah.
There were, at the time, there were tears because it was, I don't know how I'm going to overcome this. I'm already trying, and it's something that is, you don't know how to best advise about something like that. And that is one of those things that quite literally jumps in and solves it. And so when people now, I hear panic and concern and worry about AI, I get it. I do understand that. But I also think, kind of to your point, that almost co-collaborator, there will be people that will be benefiting from a chat GPT or a Copilot, thing next to them that will be helping them with things that they struggle with.
Yeah. It's a great editor. You can train a large language model to be a brilliant editor and do so. So I immediately, when you were describing that situation, I immediately jumped to this tool called Hemingway that I've used forever, which is, will review. It's used in newsrooms. It will review your work and help you write, simplify language. Say you're writing so that a 10-year-old could comprehend it, or even younger, and it's really, really useful for that. And large language models, so in that sense, could be our greatest friend. Yeah.
You've spent a number of years, both in terms of practice and in theory, in the idea around measurement.
Right.
Where do you think we're going wrong with measurement at this stage?
Very simply, we do not connect what we do from a comms perspective with the business plan of an organization. That should be the start plan, often a start point for everything that we do. And often we're abstracted our comms objectives as some weird abstraction of, they're mangled somewhere along the line. And so there's a complete disconnect between what we do and what the organization does. And often that's the first place that I'll challenge anyone that I'm teaching or working with. What's your organizational objectives, right? How do your comms objectives ladder up to that? And if they don't, there's clearly a problem. Once you've got your comms objectives, then okay, we can understand those from a data perspective and understand, and set objectives that are measurable, that are smart and measurable, that we can hold ourselves accountable to. And our industry has got itself in a horrible mess because of this fundamental disconnect, and created, measurement systems that are complete nonsense in an attempt to prove its value. And it's utter bullshit.
I think it was one of the only times I've ever cried in this industry was really early on. It was about a year in, and I worked for a client, and I worked for a client, and they had AVE as a system, and they basically took the reach of a publication, and then they times it by 25, and that was the value. There wasn't even a mathematical sum that was done.
Rate card.
It was the audience. It wasn't the rate card. It was the audience, and that was then the value.
Right.
And I remember I went on holiday to New York, and I had to do a handover, and handed all my stuff over. And my account manager, when I came back, was so frosty with me, and it went on for about a week. And then when we had our team catch up, she laid into me because all of my AVE figures were wrong, because that's not how you do AVE. I mean, there's no way of doing AVE. And it was such, the director was like, oh, no, just to clarify, that is actually what this client has asked for specifically. And it was like, oh, well, okay, well, we'll draw a line under it. And I was like, I'm sorry. And it took me out and took me by surprise. And it was horrible. But both methods were nonsense. And it's scary because actually we get, very occasionally now, we get a, can you tell us the AVE for a piece on BBC News? I literally can't. Can't. And it is kind of astonishing that it's still there. You've kind of gone through both theory and practice first, theory second. Is there a kind of a thread of everything that you've done that you can see at this point?
Very good friend of mine, Don Birch, asked me that question, actually. He's a coach who's helped me at one stage. I mean, part of the PhD research project is, reflexivity. And I really struggled at one point because I've ended up deconstructing the industry that I worked in and built my whole professional life. And at one point I wondered whether there was much value in what we did at all. Just because I'd read so much critical work. And I think what I want to do is make the business case for the value of what we do, and in doing that, enable practitioners to be remunerated appropriately and get the value that they deserve for the value they create.
Interesting. It's a perfect place to be, and it is that gap between, the conference was talking about that gap between theory and practice. That's a really important place. Finally, is there, kind of looking back, is there a moment in your journey that you can see as being accidentally brilliant? How would you describe that?
I think being sat in I think it was 2013 or 14, being sat in a CIPR council meeting. These are quite dry meetings. Rolling my eyes and looking across the room at this woman called Sarah Hall, who was also rolling her eyes, and then having a conversation with her afterwards, which became the start of a beautiful relationship. We're now married, and a force for good within, I hope, force for good within the industry. She is both my fiercest critic and strongest advocate. Most pieces of work that I put out go across her desk from a critical perspective, and I think it's probably why I'm able to do much of the work I do. So actually, I'd say that moment.
It's a pretty good moment.
It was instinctive, actually, as well. It's completely instinctive. That.
I had no idea that you met at a CIPR.
It was CIPR council meeting. I think it was 2013.
How do they
might need to fact check that?
How do they not have that as part of their sort of marketing about being a member?
Member networking.
Find your future husband or wife.
Yeah. Sarah will tell a story. She'll tell a story when we stood for council together, and she beat me, and she got more votes than me, and I emailed her, the cocky little shit I was, saying, can we grab a coffee? And if you know Sarah, she's very forthright. She was a young mum, and was instantly dismissive of this bloke who was demanding coffee because she didn't have the time. Clearly didn't have the time and didn't want to waste the time. But I didn't realize that quite who she was at that time and the force that she was to be reckoned with.
How is that? You two have worked together, and so for context, Sarah was our non-exec. Now is at the PRCA, and we work together now in the same. You both have, in my opinion, you both have the same kind of guiding principle of who and what we are. How is that working together? How does that work at home? What are some of the principles you have? Do you have time where you just don't talk about PR?
you have to shut off from stuff. But generally, no, we're generally we're full on. I mean, we've got busy lives, right? We've got 5 kids and a dog, and we go backwards and forwards. We've got a place in the North East, we've got a place in London as well. We have benefited massively from this wonderful industry that we work in, but it's always there, it's always around us. But yeah, we very definitely have times that we switch off. We happen to be both working in London this week for a couple of days, so we had a couple of nights together. Sunday we're going away, together for getting the grandparents in to look after the kids. We're going away for the weekend together, and that's our time. Yeah.
So it's not just as some people might think, it's you two sort of leafing through Campaign magazine.
No, I do wake up some mornings. I do wake. The woman doesn't sleep. I do wake up some mornings to a messenger feed, or a WhatsApp feed, full of stuff to read. Yeah, I do. Literally do. I do. Yeah,
Morning.
I do. Yeah, I do. Can you make me a coffee?
Thanks.
There's your reading.
Stephen, thank you so much.
Thanks. It's been a joy. It's been good.